Good. So, what can I do for you this evening?
Just you and me, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Trying some new things as far as recording and whatnot. So, excuse me if it sounds a little bit weird. Um, yeah, so I changed my sort of business model on how Town Hall works going forward. In that now, basically, people that have used me in the last 2 months or so, they can sign in. The people who've not used me in the past would they'd have to pay $10 but most of the time I'll be tweeting out free codes anyway. But it was just a way for me to find out who to be expecting, who's going to be showing up, whether or not. Because oftentimes I would run home, get home at 11 at 7 o'clock on a Monday night, and there wouldn't be anybody here. So at least it gives me an idea of whether or not I can take the time out of my day to help people. So do you have anything
Absolutely.
specifically that you'd like to look at?
Yeah. So here's where I am. I've gone to um, taking all of my old home movie DVDs and digitizing them and adding them to iTunes now. So I've burned through all pretty much all of my hard drive space. So
Yeah.
if you remember, my general backup plan is I have a 1 terabyte internal hard drive and I have a one 1 terabyte drive that's attached directly here that's hooked up to Time Machine, and then I keep a second drive kind of off site and I plug it in about once a month just to try to just to have a third backup. So my question is, obviously I'm out of space and I need more, and I could easily just go out and buy an external 5 terabyte drive. But what about the backup situation? How would I work all these different backups, and what's my best way to set all of this up?
So I tell people all the time, and I've probably told you the same thing. When you are in the movie business, you're in the hard drive buying business. When you are in the
Right.
shooting in RAW, picture wise, you're in the hard drive buying business. So yeah, you're ultimately you're going to want to upgrade those drives and get larger drives. So it sounds like right now you've got two data drives and then your backup drive. So your data drive is in the your internal drive, and then you've got a media drive. Those are your two data drives. You've got movies probably on the internal drive, and you've got movies on the external drive too. Is that correct?
No, not really. I don't have a media drive. I've just got two. I've got my regular internal drive and then two backup drives.
Oh, okay. So you're running out of space on the internal drive, which sounds like maybe you need to go to a media drive. So a
Yeah,
media,
that's what I'm trying to figure out. If I moved all my media files to a media drive, but then I got to have a backup plan for the media
yeah.
drive. So
So
I'm trying to figure out how to coordinate all that.
so if you look at it as a simple addition math equation, you've got one drive plus the other drive. So your internal drive plus your media drive equals your your backup drive. So if you have a 1 terabyte internal drive and a 2 terabyte backup media drive, you need at least a 3 terabyte backup drive. So one plus one equals your target, which is your backup drive. So that's really what you're probably going to be doing is getting yourself, and you could take one of those backup drives and make it a media drive. So you then take all of your media and put it onto the external media drive, which means that the only time that that data is going to be accessible is when that media drive is plugged up, which in your case, because you're using a desktop, is most of the time. People with laptops,
Right.
people with laptops do this all the time, where they just don't have the hard drive space internally, so they move all their data to an external drive. Then they go to the beach or they go on vacation or somewhere, and they expect or they think in their mind that they're going to be able to find that data. Well, that data is sitting on a hard drive back at their house. So you've got to have your internal drive and then a media drive, which is probably what you're going to go to. And that media drive can be a 5 terabyte drive if you want it to be, but if it is, that means that your target, your backup drive has to be 6 terabytes, which in this case is not really going to be. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I'm just trying to figure out if I could keep the reason I have two backup drives now is because I'm just paranoid with all my pictures and movies on this that if I was just to have, my desktop and my normal backup drive, which is always plugged in, if somebody breaks in and,
Yeah.
grabs it, they're both gone. Or if we have a fire or a flood or whatever, they're both gone.
Yeah.
So I keep that extra offsite backup. So how that would be my other question is, okay, if I got a media drive, then I need to have, so I got to get a media drive, then I get a backup drive that equals that, and then and a second backup drive?
Yes, unless you invest in an offsite plan like CrashPlan or Carbonite or Mozy, one of those with Backblaze is another one. The issue with that though is that you're going to be paying a larger amount of money because you're backing up more than one hard drive. The consumer plans that are like, I don't know, between 60 and $100 a year with something like CrashPlan, they will only back up one internal drive. So as soon as you start adding on external drives to the equation, they charge more money. Personally, I'd rather see two hard drives that are switched out. And yes, that requires you to buy larger hard drives in the long run. So you could take one of the backup drives, make it a media drive. You'd basically kind of lose the use of the second backup drive that you have right now, and you would replace that with two larger hard drives that you'll use to swap out as backup drives. Do you have more than 1 terabytes worth of data, media, or you see yourself going to more than 1 terabyte worth?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've just started this project and it burned through probably 250 gigabytes in a couple of weeks. So I'm sure if I go through the whole thing, I'm going to need several terabytes. So
Yeah.
you're right. I could probably use one of the. I mean, each of my two backup drives are 1 terabyte now. I could use one as a media drive, and that would probably do me for I don't know a couple of years maybe,
Then
and
yeah,
then
that would
get a 3 or 5 terabyte backup.
yeah, that would be a good idea to do that then. That's exactly what you should do. And the other thing you could do is you could, instead of investing in two hard drives for now, you could kind of cut your losses, move everything over to the second media drive, or the second drive, which is a media drive. Uh, that that leaves you with one backup drive at the moment, which is a terabyte. So you could still use that 1 terabyte until the how do I say it? Until the sum of both the internal drive and the backup drive, sorry, the internal drive and the media drive are larger than 1 terabyte. At that point, you've outgrown it, and you're going to have to get another hard drive anyway. Um, Regardless, you got to go out and buy yourself a large multiple terabyte hard drive pretty soon, it sounds like, which is going to be your backup drive.
Yeah, it sounds like I need to get two of them from what you're saying. If I
It,
want to have one as a permanent backup, and then one if I want to do keep my off-site backup option.
yeah, that's really the best way to go. And I just did the same thing myself. I keep a lot of media on an external disk, and I finally went over 1 terabyte, so I had to go out and get a larger drive. And it's sort of a cascading or a domino effect. Everything past that or on the other side of that has to also be larger as far as backup
Right.
goes. Yeah.
So
So
so then if I go to this configuration where I got my main internal drive here, and I make one of the external terabytes be the media drive. So I've got that plugged in all the time, and so that can access the media from here, and then I would add another. Say I get a 3 or a 5 terabyte backup drive. Those could both. So that backup drive would back up the two. It would back up the internal and the media drive
yes,
together.
yes, as long as you know Apple's completely backwards thinking when it comes to making sure that Time Machine includes an external drive as a backup. First and foremost, when you use the media drive, make sure it's formatted for the Mac OS Extended Journaled. If you just buy it at Sam's or whatever, it's going to be formatted for Windows most likely, and Time Machine will not back up a Windows formatted drive. So when you plug it up, you can open up Disk Utility and reformat it as a Mac OS Extended Journaled. Uh, but then here's what Apple does, and this is just one of the things that bothers me. In the Time Machine settings in System Preferences, and I'm doing it on my screen here, when you go to Options, you have a list of drives. Now, right now, I'm actually this is a perfect example. I've got, let's call it a media drive connected to this machine that I'm on right now. It's called Scratch Disk, and really it's just a drive that I dump all my video like I'm recording right now. I dump it onto that Scratch drive. So it does not need to be included in the backup equation. Because it doesn't need to be included in the backup equation, it doesn't need to be backed up, it is on this list. Now, if I wanted the scratch disk to be included, then for Apple's way of thinking, I would have to select it and take it out of this list, which is stupid.
That is cool.
They should just give you a list of drives and you check the ones that you want to be included in the drives, but instead they have this backwards double negative thinking. So taking that media drive out of this list will include it as a in the backup. That,
Okay.
yeah, it's kind of stupid, but that's the way they do it. So that just make sure that the media drive is not in this list and it's formatted for the Mac, and then Time Machine will back it up if it's connected to this computer. Now,
Okay.
Time Machine, by the way, will be in this list and it will be grayed out because Time Machine cannot back itself up. So it's going to stay in that list. That confuses people sometimes too.
Got it. All right. So in my way of thinking, it sounds to me that I probably buy myself some time and save a little bit of money right now just by using one of those backup drives, converting that to a media drive, just reformat it and move my iTunes library, which is where all my videos are held. Just move it to that,
Hmm.
and then um, and then get at least one, but probably two multiple terabyte drives to use as an on-site backup and an off-site backup.
Right. And if these
Does
are,
that sound right?
yeah, that sounds perfect. If these are in iTunes, you said that all your videos are living in the iTunes library. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay, so when you move the iTunes folder, you know that you go into your home folder, into the music folder. Let me see, I'll pull mine up here now as well. Uh, and the music folder here, and you've got the iTunes folder right here. Now that contains everything. So if you move that folder from your internal drive to an external drive, you're going to have to let iTunes know that you moved it, and it's pretty very easy to do. You just have iTunes turned off or shut down. You drag the folder over. It's going to take an hour, 2 hours, or an extremely long time, depending on how much content's there to copy over. Then when you open up iTunes for the first time, after having moved it, you'll hold down I think it's the option button. When you hold down the option key, it'll present you with a choice so you can direct it to what iTunes library you want to open it with, and that would be the external one.
Okay.
All right, that's a mistake, and I think that you're farther along than this in your computer use, but I have a lot of people that will do that. They'll move their iPhoto library or now Photos, or they'll move their iTunes library to an external drive. Then they open iTunes or they open Photos, and they won't really read the message, and they'll just click the blue button thinking, all right, I'm just going to keep going. And what it's doing is creating a new empty library. And then I get panicking emails saying all my stuff's gone. And it's not gone. It's just they just accidentally created another library. So I usually
Yeah.
point that out to everybody when you're going down that road. All right.
Okay. I think that's it. That was my main thing. Just trying to figure out how to do all of this.
Good. All right. Well, I was glad I'm hopefully able to help. Yeah, just Costco and some of those places have really large hard drives for pretty cheap these days. The days of
Is there any particular brand that you like or don't like?
yeah, I don't like the Western Digital My Books. I do not like those at all. I do like
Okay.
the Seagate Backup Backup Plus. They're called. I like the Seagates, but I don't like the Western Digitals. Every hard drive dies. You've probably gone through one or two yourself, and the Seagates seem to die the least often. There are only a few drive manufacturers in the world, and most companies that you buy a hard drive from, they actually someone else made the hard drive. They just made the enclosure, like LaCie or
Mm-hmm.
Toshiba, or
Okay.
somewhere like that. So there are only a few hard drive manufacturers, but the Seagates are
There's
pretty
some
good.
others that I've seen, but I haven't done a whole lot of reading on where it looks like they have their own Wi-Fi connectivity. Have you seen those?
Yeah, stay away. I'd stay away from, and a lot of that's the MyBook thing where they've got a little digital readout on the front of the hard drive that says, "Hey, here's how many pictures you have. Here's how much video you have." That's basically useless to me. Uh,
Okay.
Simple to the point. All you need is just a hard drive. I'm I'm not into and you really don't need an Ethernet network attached storage drive. You just need a good USB drive. And now here's another. Actually, this is a really good point. While we're talking about it, your media is going to live on this media drive, which means you're going to be accessing it all the time, back and forth. That really kind of needs to be a fast drive. Now, the Time Machine drive does not need to be a fast, speedy performance level drive. It just needs to be a drive that's just simple USB that over time runs copies the data. But that media drive needs to be a pretty good performing drive, because if your media is there and you're accessing it, it needs to be a fast enough drive to keep up with what you're doing. Now, if you're editing video on that drive, then you need either USB 3, which your old iMac probably doesn't have USB 3, or you need a FireWire or Thunderbolt. So FireWire is
I'll
obsolete.
probably edit video on the internal and just move it to the external
Say that again.
once I'm done. I'll probably just
Oh,
edit the video on the main thing and then move it over to store it. But that's
okay.
a good point about the speed of the drop out. How can I determine? Because I want to just we were talking about using one of my existing backups as the media drive. How can I tell um, what I have and whether it's sufficient enough?
Well, the connections on the back are the first and foremost factor. So if you've got FireWire 800 on the back of that, definitely use that above USB. Most likely it's just a USB connected drive, and that's fine for storage, like I said. But in the long run, when you do buy your next one, you at least price out the Thunderbolt drives. Now, Thunderbolt, they're expensive. They're not cheap. It's the newest technology, and it's the technology that everybody's kind of going with these days, but it's expensive. Um,
I don't know if my Mac even has Thunderbolt. The Mac's probably a year old, maybe something like that. Would
oh,
it have Thunderbolt?
yeah, it would. Yeah, if it's a year old, it's an iMac. Is it one of the thin iMacs or like an inch
Yeah,
thick?
it's a thin one.
Then it's gonna have Thunderbolt.
Okay.
Yeah. Uh, so this when you price it out, price out a Thunderbolt drive and see what it costs. If it's probably going to be significantly more expensive than the USB drive.
Well, then I may not want to, because we were talking about using one of my existing backup drives as the media drive. It sounds like maybe that's not a good idea. If more than likely they're going to be just, I know they're connected to USB right now.
Well, if you're editing on the internal and then moving the final product over to the external, then it's really not that big a deal. And so I think you're probably okay. And you can always move it to another larger, fancier drive down the road. If your media sits on an external drive, and let's say you're streaming it over to Apple TV, the only thing that you got to think about is the time that it takes for that external media drive to spin up. So if I have Superman living on my external drive and I go hit play on the Apple TV, that drive needs to spin up before it actually starts loading it Wi-Fi wise onto my Apple TV. And you're talking about 15 seconds or something like that.
Okay, well, that's exactly how I do it. I mean, I've got all my home movies stored here, and I access it through one of my two or three different Apple TVs that I have, depending on what TV I want to stream it to. So
Yeah,
that's what it'll be doing.
yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
it shouldn't be too bad. And then really, then the bottleneck becomes how fast is your Wi-Fi connection with your routers and all that stuff. But and how far
Okay.
away is your Apple TV from the main router and that sort of thing. All right, yeah, I know you've got a big project on
Okay.
your hands.
No, no big deal. That's good. I appreciate the insight.
Was the sign up process for Town Hall easy enough for you?
Yeah, it's great. I downloaded your app, so that
Oh,
was easy.
yeah, good. Thanks. Yeah, I'm real happy about that. I'm going to send out a notice saying that I just got the app put together recently, and yeah, we're real happy with that. It's real simple, just basically a web version of I mean, an app version of the website. But there's some people that have been asking me for that. So, all right,
Sure. Okay. Good.
all
Thanks
right,
again. I appreciate it.
all right, no problem. Bye.